Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Exodus or Pure, the guy you're watching. Um, Unfortunately, I had to add my voice to this particular video because on this stream, the audio wasn't synced correctly and I had an error. So instead of, uploading it with crappy audio or no audio, I figured I'd throw on a commentary. This is the sixth dungeon that you'll experience within Neverwinter. If you're not familiar with the game, it is an MMO. This is on Xbox One. It was recently ported to the next gen console at the end of last month, and it's free to download, free to play. There are money options from what I can tell. It's not really pay to win. It's just kind of pay to do shortcuts, for cosmetics and more character slots and stuff like that. I made a Guardian Fighter, which is, for those of you who are familiar with MMOs or just, RPGs in general, it's a tank class. So, you're up front, trying to take all the damage, protect others, and, as well as, deal melee damage, etc., in close quarters combat. As you can see, I was level 46 at this particular time. In dungeons, you go in as 5-man teams. Everybody in Neverwinter has the option to take a companion. And so essentially, like I said, you'll have 10 people fighting with you. Obviously 5 are just NPC AI, and but 5 are real players. So I was a tank, and as you can see, there's level 47. That's a control wizard at the top. Psycha, Somatic. Silas is a hunter, level 44, hunter ranger. Zeus was the cleric, healer, level 45, and Duncan was the rogue, level 45. So the trickster rogue is essentially, the same as all the other MMOs, the melee DPS, probably the highest DPS that you can get in a melee form. Cleric, obviously the healer role, main healer. Silas is a hunter ranger, which is a mixture of ranged and close quarters DPS. Preferably, I think they like to stay back, with their bow attacks and such, but, they are allotted a dual wielding component for melee. And then the control wizard is kind of like your CC, but not really. It is still, I think, more of a range DPS class than anything. But, as you can see there, there was a CC element, freezing the enemy, etc. So that's essentially the makeup of this particular group's dungeon run. Like I said, Lair of the Pirate King. There's undead enemies and, of a pirate-esque lore aspect background. So, as you can see, we're going through doing different things. And I think to kind of pass time, I'll kind of talk more on my MMO background and kind of what got me into the genre to begin with, and just walk you through some of that history. If you're, interested, by all means, I appreciate your time and listening. And like I said, this dungeon itself does provide a lot of cool gameplay. So if you want to continue watching, that is much appreciated as well. So essentially what got me into MMOs was way back when my cousins and I used to always go to, the house of, one of our cousins. So, a lot of us were the same age, and my uncle and aunt lived on a canal, and many of us like to go fishing. So for the summers as kids, we would all, go to their house and stay in their house. They had a, pretty big house, real nice house. And, for a week, essentially, we'd stay there, all of us cousins and our our dads and stuff would go there and go fishing for the week, and do other, activities and stuff like that. And it was a lot of fun. And I remember one summer I was there, and my cousin, whose house it was, had EverQuest. And I want to say it was the beta or something at the time. I don't think it was the full game. And, he was playing it, and I was like, well, what is this? And he's like, oh, this is this game where, you can create your character and you're around, and there's a bunch of other people, playing the game that are characters too, like this dude, he's pointing at the screen like, this guy's the real person, this guy. And I'm like, what? It's like, no way. Like, how? It just blew my mind because I was really young at the time. I think I was like 11 years old or something like that. And it was, going on 12 or something. It was just crazy to me that, to think that people worldwide could all be playing, the same game in real time together. So in, like I said, varying ages and, stuff like that. So it was just, this crazy concept, especially being a 3D world. And, essentially it was the first of its kind. I know there was Ultima before that, considered MMO, and of course, MUDs, text-based games. But, EverQuest was really the revolutionary, fully 3D immersive, MMO that we know today, as the genre. It was the pretty much, like I said, the inspiration and, starter to what, a lot of the games we have today, in regards to, like this game and, other games like World of Warcraft and stuff like that have pulled, ideas and, and resources from what they experienced in EverQuest and put it in within their games. And obviously I know Dungeons and Dragons, the background of Neverwinter has been around for years and years, and essentially EverQuest also drew ideas of their world and their classes, and races and stuff from that as well. But EverQuest, like I said, just did it different than everybody else's. There hasn't been an MMO like it since, and I don't think there ever will be. It was highly focused on community and reliance upon other people and adventure, rather than being scripted, a text, quest line rather, and, being a linear progression where you're being dictated to essentially what activities and what zones and what areas you have to go to at certain levels. There were multiple places, and it was a real breathing world, and multiple places that you could go to on your own, explore, and find what you thought yourself was the best, for your, adventure. And it provided, like I said, a lot of fun times. You could essentially get lost in the world, traveling, trying to find things, or, in that game, if you died, not only did you lose experience, you lost, all your items. Like, your items remained on your body, and you had to go try to find your corpse, and it was just wild. So anyways, back to the actual story. That summer, we were there and watching them. My other cousin and I were watching, our older cousin play it, and he was just explaining it to us and showing us different things, and we were just amazed. And so he let us play it for a while. Here and there we took turns, and we just got hooked. And so, of course, later that year, for Christmas, the cousin that was my age, well, actually you're older, him and I also acquired the game, and the full version stuff like that was out by then. And we just all played together, and we played with a couple of our, like I said, older cousins' friends who introduced us to the game, and it was just a blast. My very first character, oddly enough, I went with a warrior, a tank, much like you can see me playing here in this game. Not because I thought, that's what I wanted to play, or because it was, really what I wanted to play in essence of my role. But it was just what I was advised to more so start out with, as a first character, because, back then it was still a mystery. Nobody really knew what lied ahead for everything, and or how the classes were to play out. And the funnest thing about that, again, like I said, EverQuest was based on your, character's race determined where you started out, and you could start out completely in a different area than, everybody else. There wasn't just this general starting area where, everyone was introduced, and there was no, tutorial. Well, there was a tutorial back then, but it wasn't in the essence of, you end up in the same area as everybody else afterwards, and you didn't really get a huge gain from it. It was just kind of introducing you to the controls and how to move around and stuff like that. So anyways, I made a warrior. It was a half-elf warrior. And like I said, the reason why was because I was told it would be the easiest to pick up on. And again, I was just a young kid. And so knowing, that I had to go buy certain things at certain levels in regards to maybe spells or train up skills and stuff like that, that was all like just completely foreign to me. And, I didn't want to make things too difficult, so I went with just a straight melee. And again, my cousins and his friends would help me out. They threw me some items here and there. And of course, all you had to do as a warrior was find, gear, and then, essentially you could just stay out in the world and, gain experience, try to find items to better improve your character. Whereas, like I said before, caster classes would have to go make trips after so many levels just to buy, their new spells and stuff like that. And so that was the cool thing too about the warriors. It didn't require a lot of money. Now, granted, the people looking back on the game are still playing that game in an emulator form to this day. In order to be an actual successful, good, warrior, you do need good gear. And that's one thing, obviously, that at the time wasn't such a big deal because everybody was running around in, scraps and rags because it was a new game. So I did Half-Elf Warriors my first. I think I only got on like level 20 something. And then like my cousin and his friends, my older cousin and his friends wanted to like change servers or something like that. So my, cousin that was a year older than me and we just decided to switch servers with them. So we created new characters, and on that server I made a wood elf druid. And the reason I went druid is because, after experiencing different classes and seeing what they could do, it really interested me to be able to travel quickly. Because as a warrior, I had to run everywhere or, rely on other people to help, teleport me to other areas to move quicker and stuff like that. So I went with Druid because I wanted to be the one to be able to pour it around if I needed to and just get from A to B quicker, to find things or to explore in a faster fashion because, EverQuest, for those of you who haven't played it, required a lot more hours to, advance and progress. Because like I said, a lot of time was just spent traveling rather than actually, participating in, an activity to gain experience or, get gear. So, again, I went with Druid. I think I got that character only like in the low 30s. And at that point, again, there was, they were wanting to change servers for some reason. I think because a new server was opening up or because they had affiliations of other people they knew on that server. So we did it yet again. And at that point, I told them, I said, look, I want to get a character to max level. I want to see what, more areas than just these starting areas. And I want to be able to do some of these raids that I'm hearing about and stuff like that. And again, I was just a young kid. At that point I was, in my young teenage years and stuff like that. And they're in agreement. They're like, yeah, okay, yeah, we want to do this as well. We want to try it out. So finally we found a home, quote unquote. And I made at that point I made a erudite mage and a magician. Was the reason I went with magician is because I wanted to have a pet that I could rely on to do damage and to take the monsters away off of me, attention off me as well, the aggro, or and so on and so forth. Plus, I wanted just to try something completely different. As I said before, the warrior, melee DPS, the tank, and then the druid that I made, the teleporter, the support role of healer. A backup healer wasn't the best healer, but it was a healer still nonetheless. And, obviously they had, good utility buffs like Spirit of Wolf, which made people run faster, Wolf Form, which raised their attack, as well as, gave them increased running speed. And then just being able, like I said, I was able to make money porting people around and stuff on the druid. So I want to try something completely different with, like DPS, like pure DPS, caster DPS with the magician and, having a pet to also help, do damage and, bring utility to the group, to do like off tank or, whatever. And that was cool with the magician on that game. On EverQuest, you had, the earth, fire, air, and water elementals, and each of them provided, a unique attack line from the other. They looked completely different. The water would have a cold, water-based nuke, ice-based nuke, as well as do damage, normal melee damage and stuff like that. And the earth one had a root, so it could, be a CC essentially. And then the fire pet had a built-in damage shield, as well as a fire nuke, on top of its melee DPS. And then the air pet had a stun, spell, and then which turned into, damage or whatever later on. So it could, stun the enemies from casting, detrimental spells, or just stun them for an initial period of time to not let them attack, you or anyone else, on top of their melee DPS. And later on, once the game did expand, those class, or variating pets, different elemental pets acquired, an actual class. I mean, before they were very similar with their hit points and, like I said, just slightly different with their attacks and obviously their looks. But later on in the second expansion, they adopted like a class-based type thing. So the Earth pet became like more of a warrior, like a tankier type, with more the highest amount of hit points between the pets. Could take the most damage. The water became like a rogue, where it could backstab and do the most, melee DPS on top of the water nuke that I had. Air pet became like a monk. In that game, a monk was like a pure melee DPS who could feign death and was mostly known for pulling and stuff like that. And they could, air pet could still do its stun component, but it had like a high damage kick that it, implemented after, it adopted the class. And then the fire became more like a wizard, so it wasn't as good as like the level 50s pet, because it wasn't as tanky. Like, it had the least amount of HP. It could do good nuke damage. It acquired more nukes, but its damage shield wasn't nearly as good either. So it kind of became a little more worthless. But anyway, so yeah, like that character, I ended up getting the max level. I didn't get it to the max level 50 because in the classic it was 50. And then Kunark came out, which was the second expansion, and third expansion was Velius. And I actually didn't get to max level 60 because 60 was the new max level come Kunark. So I didn't get 50 till after, Kunark, or during Kunark. I didn't get 60 until sometime in Velius. And then after that, I got to 65 once some of the other ones came out, but I wasn't playing as serious or as much back then. So anyways, that was my very first MMO. Like I said, the Magician was my main. It was the one that I first maxed out. My actual main that got maxed out, but it was my third character created, in essence, of a serious character. I had a couple alts before then on those other servers, but that's the character when I, talk to people to this day who bring up that game or who I play with on an emulator that does do the classic experience of EverQuest called Project 1999. That's the character I always refer to because the other ones weren't, relevant. Like I said, I was getting the feel of the game, and then we ended up switching servers and blah, blah, blah. And that's what ultimately led to me taking so long to get to max level and to experience the end game content, was because of the server switches. But so after that, I dabbled in the City of Heroes game, which I highly, highly enjoyed. Mostly because there was more friends that I knew from, like high school and school that I went to school with, that played that game. Whereas EverQuest, like, I was the only one that I knew in my immediate area. But obviously, like I said, I played with my cousins and some of his friends. But yeah, so City of Heroes, like I said, provided the opportunity to play with people that I knew from school. And so that was a lot of fun because, like I said, it was such good customization and how you wanted to look. And again, making your own superhero. I mean, who didn't want to do that, at some point in time as a kid, growing up, in my generation. So we, a lot of us played that, and, I did different variations characters on that. It was a short-lived experience though, because, I had college coming up, and I didn't want to be sucked into an MMO and distracted, from my studies. So, I only played that for the, last part of my senior year of high school and through, the summer leading up to college a little bit. And then I ended on that. But after that, as far as college, when college came out, I didn't do World of Warcraft. Obviously the biggest one ever made, it seems like. Most successful, of course. To this day, I didn't even play that. I did try EverQuest 2 for like a month or two. Didn't really like it. And obviously that came out the same time as World of Warcraft. A lot of the people I did play City of Heroes with went to World of Warcraft initially, and then and then went to other games like Star Wars Galaxies and other things like that. The only other MMO that I played a decent amount, like I said, within my college years, where it was multiple months, was Guild Wars, and the only reason I really did that was because it was a one-time purchase and it was free. As a college student, I didn't necessarily want to have to worry about subscription costs and all that crap, so I didn't, like I said, didn't want to bother with WoW and EverQuest 2 and games like that, because I had to put my money into more important things, so and my time. So Guild Wars, I played that because it was one-time purchase and then it was free, and obviously it was a little more friendly and time constraints because you could play at your own pace, kind of like a first-person shooter. You can play so much of the campaign and quit anytime you want, or a normal RPG, same sort of thing. You can play as much as you want and then quit. You don't have to invest hours just to get something significance done in regards to your character, like you do in some MMOs. So Guild Wars, I played that for a while. Like I said, not too much again because I was in college. In college, I mostly focused on like first-person shooters and console games, because it allowed me to make money back at the time. Like Halo, the Halo series, and then ultimately Gears of War series. I competed in competitively online and at local tournaments and regional and national tournaments. So that was a lot of fun being able to, not only put time into a game for fun and, to meet new people and have friends, that were close by and stuff like that. It provided more of that than an MMO did for me. But it also provided a way, a means to make money in return. So that's what I focused on essentially in college, and I didn't really stick to MMOs or really try, like I said, all the MMOs that you have come out or that you can see to this day, even still, being long out of college. I don't really try many MMOs just because I know the time sink, and, it's just as you get older, you have a lot less time. So it was cool to see this game, Neverwinter, come out for free on a console because one, I just like the feel of a controller in my hand more than a mouse and keyboard for this style of anyways, because this style you're doing a lot of aiming. Obviously you can see the reticle in the middle of my screen. You have to aim your attacks and move around a lot and stuff like that. And so when I'm doing that, I prefer a controller. So it was when I noticed this game on computer. And then, of course, like games like was like DC Universe, whatever, they do the same thing. Terra, I think does the same thing. So when I do it with the mouse and keyboard, yeah, it's a little more efficient, mouse and keyboard supposedly, but it just doesn't feel as good to me. Because like I said, I come from the background of playing those other games competitively, so just doing it and aiming and looking around like that, for me, is more comfortable with a controller. And I'm fully aware that you can use console controllers on PC now, but it's just a lot harder to align the keys to a controller in a default custom sense these days, because there's so many keys on a keyboard in comparison to a controller, so to try to map everything and program it in is can be pretty tiresome, and just not really knowing a sufficient way to do it until you play around with it for a lot of time, then you're just wasting time. So to have a game of this caliber come not only free, but already built in a professional sense on their end to a controller, it was just awesome in my opinion. So I was like, heck yeah, I'm gonna try it out. Free, can't beat that. A full game, that's had multiple years under its belt on the PC coming over, so it's polished. It was just a no-brainer to try because obviously there's a lot of fun to be had, and I've always enjoyed MMOs. So yeah, like I said, I alluded to playing an emulated version of classic EverQuest, I still do that from time to time. Like I said, it was awesome to get back into it for the nostalgia's sake, remembering, the things that you did as a kid, but also now playing it again with having the knowledge of what you did before, as well as, being able to participate in things that you may not have at the time. Because like I said, at the beginning, a lot of things were unknown. And so now coming back to it, you're able to know about certain like awesome, cool items, really unique items, and go and try to obtain them, or take part in zones, leveling in zones you might have never experienced back in the day. So yeah, I mean, so that's cool. Like I said, if you are a fan of EverQuest, you know what EverQuest is, in a classic sense. Because if you've played EverQuest in the past, I don't even know, 10 years, it's nothing like the EverQuest that I'm talking about, like the 1999 through 2001, 2002 timeline. It's just completely different than what you see now. Completely different game. So yeah, project1999.org. I'd suggest checking it out if you are interested in a classic MMO, or a more vintage MMO, rather than the ones that you see these days. I know a lot of people will be like, oh, well, the graphics, this and that. Well, of course, it was 1999, back when it's predominantly dial-up connection, so it's not going to be too graphic intensive and stuff like that. But there are things you can do to kind of brighten it up. But at the same time, it's such a clean, simplistic game. And kind of like, if you're familiar with, PC games, or, first-person shooters, those usually make for the best games. Halo 1, for instance, probably the best Halo out of all of them. And then, of course, like Counter-Strike. Like, that's one of the biggest games of all time in the essence of first-person shooters, even just in gaming in general, of a following and a community. It's one of the more simplistic games, but it still resonates with that many people. So EverQuest is kind of the same sort of ordeal, in my opinion. Obviously, it doesn't have as big of a draw, just because there are so many other MMOs out there that can satisfy the needs of people. But like I said, that game is one of a kind. The classes, there hasn't really been a class-based system, even remotely similar to some of the stuff that they introduced and had. And it's, like I said, stayed unique because nobody else has really done it. So, but yeah, like I said, Neverwinter. That's kind of a little background. Like I said, there's a couple more games I tried out or whatever here and there, but I didn't feel it was relevant. But so yeah, like I said, I had an MMO background for years and years, and so it was a no-brainer to pick this game up and give it a try. And granted, it's a completely different style than what I'm used to. It did remind me of Guild Wars in the sense of having like a storyline of sorts, to where it's, you're given these tasks, these quests, and you go handle it, and then through that's essentially how your character progresses. And it's, it's dictated how you're going to progress because everyone's essentially doing the same thing in order to level up. And like I said, you're kind of forced into, at certain levels, is when you can do this activity or that activity, and you can no longer do it, essentially when you out level it, and so on and so forth. So it kind of limits you, and like I said, it puts you in a certain box, and trickles you down the line, so to speak. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's a free game on Xbox One. It's a no-brainer to do that. Get it and try it out, especially having an MMO background. As you can see there, I was a noob, kind of jumped the gun on running over to the boss, and fell off the edge and died. So this is the end of the dungeon run. This is the final boss, Bartholomew Blackdagger, and it was a fun fight, as you'll soon see. So yeah, if you haven't tried Neverwinter out, I'd highly suggest it. Whether you are on the PC or the Xbox One, I believe it's the same structural system on both, where it's a free download, so it's free to play completely. Where you download it, you play it, and you get access to everything in the game. For essentially nothing. Where they make their money is through those microtransactions of buying more character slots, or buying, mounts, or buying a certain form of in-game currency to kind of help you essentially gain a shortcut in time, because those who don't pay a dime can still obtain what you get with your real life money It just takes them a significantly larger amount of time to do so. But at the same time, like I said, it's not like those who do spend money gain an advantage. I have yet to see anyone, significantly outperform me due to any sort of gear advantage or any sort of, like I said, advantage from spending real life money. So, they haven't looked, really, like I said, I haven't really noticed anyone looking extraordinarily better than I have. I haven't seen anyone performing. It's not like they can buy, different abilities for the same class or anything like that. At least to my knowledge, I haven't noticed anything like that. So it's, and they can't buy gear that makes them, like I said, a significant amount better for the content. Seems like if you have the level and you play the game, you get the gear necessary to successfully, battle through the content. And, obviously that's what's cool about this game too, is there's a skill aspect. There is in every game essentially, but some games, there isn't really a gap at all. This game, not to say that it's a huge gap, but there's obviously a gap of knowing your class, knowing your abilities. Obviously there's a tree, a class tree, a progression tree, so you can, be different than somebody else. You can go a different route, or you can select different abilities and maps different abilities and attacks to your controller that other people might not spend the points on because maybe they prefer something else. So you can have a different build, and it can make you obviously different. But being able to utilize the build you do choose in a way that's, still contributing to the role that you're supposed to be filling. So like a tank right now, like, right, I'm supposed to be able to take the aggro, take the damage, and distract from my other teammates. I don't want my other teammates getting hit or getting, mobbed by the ads and the boss, because I want them to be able to fully be capable of doing damage and healing without any stress on them. So because they do have less hit points than I do, and they do have less means of deflecting attacks and protecting themselves. So like I said, this MMO, like I said, stuck out to me because of that aspect of like I said, moving around. Like, it's action based. A lot of MMOs, you kind of are stationary, you don't move around as much. This one, like I said, it's full of action, in the essence of, like, look at this, there's so many enemies on the screen right now, and then that keep coming up, but like you have to dodge their attacks, in real time. You have to move, and that's what's cool too about this MMO. Like I said, you can fully do any ability while you're moving, whereas, like I mentioned EverQuest before, sometimes when you're casting a spell, you had to stay stationary and stuff like that. Or if you're meleeing, you had to stay in a certain range of the thing in order for your melees to register. Obviously, for any close melee, that's the case. However, you can't. It's not really moving around didn't help you at all either as far as your defense in that game. Whereas this game, you can completely avoid attacks. You can completely shield yourself and deflect attacks better by where you're positioned and what you're doing. So that's one thing I like. And there goes the boss down. As you can see, a sweet sword from my class popped up, and that's what's awesome about instancing in these cases, is I'm usually the only tank. So stuff, like that, when it drops, I almost always get it, because I'm the only one that votes need. So it's a lot of fun. And this dungeon's a lot of fun. I highly recommend doing it if you haven't done it yet. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.